Cartoon Network used to be one of the most well-respected channels on cable television, being home to some of the best shows currently on air. However, it seems that in recent years, the network has taken a dive, and that as time goes on, it only continues to get worse. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what made Cartoon Network so special, and why it eventually turned into what it is today. We're going to be going incredibly deep into some of the best shows of the 2010s, so anyways, don't forget to subscribe, and as always, enjoy the video. First of all, we need to establish what the golden age of Cartoon Network really was, which I consider to be the run from 2007 all the way to 2019, which is more often referred to as the Renaissance. The most memorable shows were released in 2010, and some of the ones that replaced them are still running today, so our timeline is going to run from 2010 all the way to the present day. And to begin, we have to look back to the beginning of the Renaissance, when shows like Total Drama Island, Star Wars The Clone Wars, and Ben 10 Alien Force were dominating the network and setting the scene for shows like Adventure Time. The reason that these three shows are important is that they were all serialized in some way, meaning that there was continuity from one episode to the next. This isn't something that's always important to enjoyability, but is crucial to the success of shows like Adventure Time and Steven Universe, as the precedent set allowed those shows to run for as long as they did. During January of 2010, Total Drama Island became the longest currently running show on Cartoon Network, with a total of 54 episodes. Total Drama Island was incredibly unique because the majority of shows at the time focused on fantasy in some way or another, while in contrast, Total Drama Island was the parody of a reality TV show, where in each season its contestants would compete trying to be the last one standing. The reason that the show succeeded despite how different it was mainly due to its writing and specifically its characters. The show's cast had a wide variety of archetypes, meaning that no matter what you were looking for, you would find at least one character that you would enjoy. By writing their scripts in a way that targeted all age ranges, the show managed to deliver in a way that still holds up today, despite being over a decade old. During the same time, Ben 10 Alien Force was cancelled, but to compensate for this, Cartoon Network would release Adventure Time, as well as Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated on the same day. If you're someone watching this video, I'm sure you know all about what made Adventure Time so good, but I'm less sure that all of you know about Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. It was a darker and kind of edgier take on classic Scooby-Doo, and in the short runtime that it had, it did an amazing job developing its characters while still playing into their established roles. When people think of Scooby-Doo reboots today, a certain show comes to mind, but Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. was nothing like this, and for a short time was the best reboot on Cartoon Network. I could keep going about what makes it so great, but I think I'll do that in its own video. Around the same time, Cartoon Network would release Regular Show, the second show to be considered one of the big four, along with Adventure Time. And by 2012, it was these two shows that were already some of the most watched shows on the network. What makes Regular Show special is that it was originally pitched as a show for Adult Swim, the late-night channel owned by Cartoon Network, which focuses more on adult animation and isn't as suitable for kids. This makes perfect sense to anyone who has watched Regular Show, as it was clearly more mature than the shows that aired before it, and seemed like it was missing something. Having seen the pilot, 2 in the AM/PM, it's very clear what the show wanted to be. Something that made Regular Show stand out is the fact that its main characters were in their 20s and weren't really impressive in any way. The episodes all followed a formula where they started fairly normal, then quickly escalated, but they did this in an incredibly entertaining way, which paired well with the way the characters were written. The series continued to grow and change, but the one thing that remained consistent was that each episode had heart. And as with most shows at the time, Regular Show was enjoyable by everyone, something that was very important during this time period. As Regular Show and Adventure Time were gaining popularity, another very important show would be released. On May 3rd of 2011, Cartoon Network would reveal The Amazing World of Gumball for the first time. They released it on the same day as the Looney Tunes show, which marked the turning point of the channel. Unlike Regular Show, Gumball focused on a very young protagonist, and blended various styles of animation to make an incredibly visually appealing show, which could still be produced relatively quickly. Gumball was immediately successful, being one of the funniest shows airing at the time. This being said, something was slightly different about Gumball. While Gumball is an amazing show, it was ever so slightly more aimed at children than all of the shows to come before it. This doesn't make it any worse, but is important to the direction that Cartoon Network would end up heading. Released at the same time, the Looney Tunes show wasn't the most popular, but is very worth mentioning, as like its contemporaries, it was a show that had a very broad appeal and a unique sense of humor that could be appreciated by many people. It mimicked the humor of sitcoms like Seinfeld with a very satirical approach to comedy, but unfortunately, it wasn't really appreciated in its time and was cancelled relatively quickly, but I do think it was worth mentioning. Throughout this time, Cartoon Network was still finding its identity, and as shows continued to be produced, the overall quality of the network was only increasing. And for over a year, we continued to live in peace as Cartoon Network continued to please its community. During 2012, Adventure Time would release its 4th and 5th seasons, marking the turning point in the show where it became much more story-based, focusing on the overall plot rather than each individual episode. At the same time, they were also acquired by Netflix, and these two things ultimately led to Adventure Time beginning to lose some of its live viewers. Although many people consider Season 5 to be one of the best seasons, it was this change that made the show have a more specific appeal, and this didn't fit with the new style that Cartoon Network was shifting to, where they preferred to air individual episodes, not accounting for the order. This would cause Adventure Time to slowly begin losing out on runtime to shows like Gumball, although it would still be one of the dominant shows for years to come. What was so great about this time period is that the shows were new enough to be interesting, but old enough to have already found their voice. Even when they followed a formula, they were distinct enough that each episode had something to provide, and it didn't feel repetitive in any way. When people think of Cartoon Network nostalgia, this is most often what they think about, because at this time, things were truly perfect. So far, not much bad has happened, and it seemed that Cartoon Network system has only led to well-written shows with amazing storytelling. It didn't seem like anything was going to change, but every day we inched a little bit closer to the event that would change everything. 2013 marks the beginning of the end for Cartoon Network. The channel would always release new shows, and the community was very accepting of this, but this time it was different. During late 2012, Cartoon Network officially announced the revival of Teen Titans, the DC show which ran from 2003 to 2006. On paper, this sounds like a good thing, but something wasn't quite right. No one knew it at the time, but something dark was simmering, and it was about to cause an uproar like nothing ever seen before it on Cartoon Network. The show was set to debut on April 23rd of 2013, and anticipation was rising. Upon release, something was clear. Teen Titans Go was like nothing before it, and to be clear, this is not a good thing. You see, Gumball was incredibly successful, one of the best performing shows on Cartoon Network, and this could be attributed to any number of things, but the increase of young viewers was something that Cartoon Network simply could not ignore. During this time period, there was a significant increase in young children watching television, and it was happening in numbers that had not been seen before. In the past, the strategy of reaching all age ranges worked because that's where the numbers were, but unfortunately, this won't always be the case. Teen Titans Go was Cartoon Network's first attempt at reaching the younger audience, and despite the horrible reception from the majority of viewers, it was clear that the show was succeeding. 2013 was a pivotal year for Cartoon Network, as it marked the cancellation of Scooby-Doo, as well as the release of Steven Universe, Uncle Grandpa, and Teen Titans Go. And to see Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. be replaced by the atrocity that was Uncle Grandpa was the first hint that things were changing. The number of mature cartoons was beginning to decrease, and the number of shows which targeted a younger audience was on the rise. Things seemed to be going in a bad direction, but we didn't yet realize to what extent. Throughout 2014 and 15, Adventure Time and Regular Show were still the two dominant TV shows, but as time went on and their ratings began to drop, Teen Titans Go was only gaining viewers, despite the continuation of extreme criticism. If you were on the internet during this time, you probably remember how hated this show really was. It united the community like never before, and brought a wave of hatred unlike anything before it or after. During 2014, we lost Total Drama Island in a wave of cancellation, but all four of the big shows were still going strong. The state Cartoon Network was in during this year was very mixed, and although the story-driven shows like Adventure Time and Steven Universe were still doing pretty good, the ratings did not reflect this. On the other hand, the episodic shows like Regular Show and Gumball were still doing very good, but they could only maintain this for so long. You see, even though these shows were doing good on their own, they had to compete with the best, because if it wasn't the most popular show, it would make more sense to air the show that was. On top of this, these shows weren't made for the audience that Cartoon Network was shifting to, and didn't really fit with the new theme. At this point, people had come to accept that despite how poorly received it was, Teen Titans Go was not going anywhere. Also, I'd like to make it clear that Teen Titans Go isn't the worst show ever. It's just not that good. Since it released in 2013, there have been dozens of shows that I would consider to be ridiculously worse. The problem is only partially with the show itself, but more what was replacing. From what I've heard, it's gone better over the years, but even then it's never gonna be as good as the original. In 2016, we received A Light in the Darkness. It was announced that Ben 10 would receive a revival, and this was great news. At this point, Ben 10 had been cancelled for over 6 years, and fans of the show were happy to hear that it was coming back. On October 1st, Ben 10 was released, and to everyone's disappointment, it was awful. It's very hard to call something objectively awful, especially in something as opinion-based as a TV show, but what the show did to the original series was truly awful. What Teen Titans Go did to the original series wasn't even half as bad as what Ben 10 did. I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but this show genuinely had no appeal to anyone above the age of 10, and it was clear that it was created for nothing other than profit. It just genuinely had no soul behind it, almost no redeemable qualities. At this point in the video, I think I should make it clear that these series aren't bad because they're aimed at children, or even because they betray their source material, but they're bad because of the same reason that YouTube Shorts are bad. I'm generalizing here because some YouTube Shorts are pretty good, but the majority of them don't deliver any meaning and just keep you there. Teen Titans Go and Ben 10 give you nothing more than the Subway Surfers that you watch below Minecraft parkour. At this point, Teen Titans Go and Ben 10 dominate the channel, and through events like the 3-day Teen Titans Go marathons, no, I'm not joking, it was made clear that they weren't going anywhere. Every day, it became a bit more clear that this age of Cartoon Network was coming to an end, but we could still have hope in our favorite shows, as almost all of them were still running. Well, they were. On January 16th, Regular Show would air its final episode, and a few months after this, it was nowhere to be seen. It was that day that we lost the first of the big 4 shows. Adventure Time managed to stay a little longer, but when the 9th season only had 14 episodes, we knew something was up. Adventure Time seasons always had at least 26 episodes, with very slight exceptions. The rise of Adventure Time began to wrap up the story, as they really had no other choice, and the pacing of the show took a slight decline. And throughout the rest of the year, Adventure Time and Gumball would fight for runtime, but with each month that would pass, it was clear that they were losing. On September 3rd, Adventure Time would air its final episode. The two shows, which were once the core of Cartoon Network, were nowhere to be seen. It's hard to describe the state that Cartoon Network was in, but what happened was tragic. It wasn't just that Teen Titans Go was the most aired show, but it was the fact that it was so aired that it accounted for over 70% of what was shown, or at least according to a Reddit post I found from 8 years ago. 2018 was truly a dark year for Cartoon Network, and to make matters worse, there was a Total Drama Island reboot, and I think by now you know why this is a bad thing. While the Teen Titans were rebooted as their actual age, and Ben 10 was rebooted as a 10-year-old, no one got worse than the cast of Total Drama Island. In the new series Total Drama-Rama, the cast were rebooted as preschoolers, like actual preschool, like 4-year-olds. Why would they do this, man? At this point, we understood. Cartoon Network didn't care. They just wanted to make as much money as possible. And we always kind of knew this, but we never thought they would go this far. At this point, Cartoon Network was taken over, and there was nothing we could do about it. During 2019, we would lose the final 2 pillars, with the cancellation of Steven Universe and then Gumball, and with this, the golden age was truly over. Currently, Cartoon Network is in the same state it has been, mainly being Teen Titans Go, but then again, who uses cable nowadays? I should also mention that Craig of the Creek is a genuinely good show, and I think it's still airing, but shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show are never making a comeback. The channel that was once a staple in our culture, raising a whole generation, is officially gone, but even though Cartoon Network is gone, the memories that it gave us are not. There's a line from the final episode of Adventure Time that I think does a pretty good job summing up my final thoughts. I think the quote is in reference to the show, but also applies to Cartoon Network as a whole. The quote goes, It seems unforgiving when a good thing ends, but you and I will always be back then. Anyways, that's all I have to say, so if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.